welcome to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you.
That's the Anna you are.
Yeah, like Anna Kasparian. Not to be mistaken with the other Annas that work here, which are none. There are none. Anyway, John, how are you doing?
I'm good. I just came from doing Larry King. I was on with the chief editor of Breitbart.
That sounds like a great time, John.
He's very reasonable on that show.
Okay, well.
He doesn't say anything crazy, really. I disagree with him on everything, but he doesn't say anything
Where
crazy.
can people see that interview?
I think on Larry King's website, I'm assuming tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, definitely tomorrow, because right now you got to watch this show.
Exactly, don't go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. All right, in the second hour, Brett Ehrlich will join in, and at some point, possibly Cenk will come in because he said that he wants to sit in JR's seat and comment on some of these stories.
JR's not in it.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know for sure if Cenk is going to join. He is busy doing CEO duties, but that's okay because I'm excited to do the show with you, John.
And I'm willing to do it with you. I'm kidding, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
Okay, all right, so let's get started. Unfortunately, we start off with some pretty bad news that broke over the weekend. A gunman opened fire at a video game tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, killing two, later killing himself. Unfortunately, aside from those who were murdered, 11 were injured and 9 were injured by gunfire. To give you some more details into the story, police have identified the attacker. They've identified him as David Katz, a 24-year-old from Baltimore. Now, Jacksonville Sheriff Mike Williams added that he did not know what motivated the shooting or whether Katz knew the victims that were targeted or whether the victims were even targeted specifically in the first place. So this story is still developing. Authorities are really holding on to whatever details. They're not releasing them to the public quite yet. But investigative journalists have done a pretty decent job so far in looking into the history of the shooter and trying to figure out who he is, why he possibly did this. The Associated Press obtained some documents indicating that he had been hospitalized in the past for mental health illnesses and that his parents disagreed deeply over how to take care of those mental health illnesses. Now, we don't know specifically what those illnesses are, so I don't want to speculate on that. The attacker died from a gunshot wound to the head, and that's according to the medical examiner. 6 shooting victims described as males in their mid-20s were treated at the University of Florida College of Medicine in Jacksonville, and also 4 were struck in their torsos while the other 2 were shot in the extremities. 1 victim is in serious condition, but luckily all of them are expected to survive. So John, I want you to jump in because this was a video game tournament for Madden, which is an NFL game. This was the first part of the tournament, meaning, this was the qualifier. And there are some witnesses saying that the shooter competed, lost, then he left, grabbed his gun and came back. That's what some of the witnesses are saying. So I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. The police, I think in this case, are being responsible and not saying that they know for sure what the motive is. And at this point, I would say I don't really care. I mean, whether he had lost and then came back or whatever, there's no logical connection between losing and shooting up the place anyway.
Right.
So whether that's the thing that set him off or not, it's not actually the reason he did it. It's something else, something more fundamental. But it's awful in any event. I mean, eSports is exploding. You have these huge gatherings and people go there because they all share a hobby basically and they want to be enthusiastic about it and pursue that. And like with every other mass shooting, no one should have to deal with this sort of thing. I've seen details on the 2 who were killed. We talked about them on the damage report this morning. And their friends and families, even though the police at this point, perhaps they have now, they hadn't actually identified for sure the 2 who had died. But family and friends of those 2 have spread their pictures and information about their lives. One had a family, like a wife and a kid at that point. And so just, obviously tragedy.
So as you know, this is one of many shootings that have happened in the state of Florida recently. And the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, was asked to comment on this shooting. And so during a press conference, he said the following: the first thing people are going to do is this political fight. But let's look at this. This young man and other young men, they're not valuing life. Something is causing that. As a society, we've got to figure this out. Every parent has got to say to themselves, what can I do better? So essentially putting the onus on parents here. So, look, we have a problem in the country. I feel like we, as a nation, as a political party, as progressives, like we've become a broken record. There's another mass shooting, more people die. We have the same conversation over and over and over again.
We even have that part of the conversation over and over
again, right? Because here's the fact of the matter. First off, Republicans, they're not gonna do anything about gun control. They're just not. We have a corrupt political system. They're getting funded by weapons manufacturers. They're getting their support from the NRA. They're not gonna do anything about gun control. We know that. We're gonna have the exact same conversation a few weeks from now, if not a month from now. We're gonna have that conversation again soon, okay? So you as the voter, what are we gonna do? Because we need to really reform politics in the country if you genuinely wanna do something about this. I've been clear about my views on guns and gun control. I don't believe in banning guns. I do believe in the Second Amendment, but I get painted as an extremist or a radical when it comes to gun control because people have bought into this idea that it's a black or white issue. Either you have guns or you don't. But what we have right now is not a common sense system where you have an individual with mental health issues getting his hands on guns. Like it just should not happen.
In this case, it should be pretty simple because they have said for a long time the problem is people with mental health issues. So in this case, clearly this is a reminder that we need to do something about that, right?
But they don't do anything about mental health issues.
That's true. That does hurt. That hurts it.
So Republicans are not only disingenuous when they point to mental health problems or video games as the real issue behind these mass shootings, they also don't really do anything about it after mentioning those things as scapegoats, right? Then are you gonna fund mental health programs?
No, they cut it.
Of course they're not.
Yeah, and just to go through a couple of those, we should have a segment, we have the same conversation every time. Dana Loesch goes on the NRA and says it's safe spaces that do it. Another guy in the NRA said that it was headphones that caused it. Having headphones that block the noise of gunfire is dangerous, and thus you probably shouldn't wear them. So maybe we'll get some sort of headphone control if we can't get gun control. The politicians, the Republicans might, since their primary is tomorrow, they might pretend for 24 hours that they actually care about this. It'll probably dissipate shortly after that. And we should probably also, while I hate having to talk about politics in connection with either this set of killings or with Mollie Tibbetts, at the time we said, well, it's a little bit weird that you're immediately politicizing this when you always say don't politicize the mass shootings. And maybe at that point they might have said, oh, that's ancient history. Well, it's coming up and you're doing it again. I mean, Rick Scott, you just saw there, was saying don't politicize this. And again, what happens? Does Donald Trump talking about it? Well, it's dependent on his race. Turns out he's white, so of course the president doesn't talk about it, and that's why it shouldn't be politicized. But you can guarantee that if it was someone else of some other race that had shot up the same exact tournament, Rick Scott would not be saying we're in a rush to politicize it. If you've watched the show for a while, Anna said these same things, I have said these same things, we will tragically, unfortunately, have to say them again.
Right. The way that things work in this country right now indicate that this type of shooting will happen again in the future, and it'll happen again in the near future. So while it's our duty to report on this story and tell you about it and give you our thoughts on it, just understand that this is a conversation that we'll be having again in another week. If not in another week, maybe in another month. I mean, mass shootings really do happen every day in the country. We just don't hear about all of them because
over
it would
250 this year.
Exactly. So we would be doing nothing other than reporting on mass shootings if we were to only focus on that one topic. And it's devastating, and it makes me feel so helpless.
Yeah, and if it was the same exact things, but they were actually labeled as terror attacks, and they were happening this often. They happened at a concert, then they happened at a concert outside of a casino, and then they happened at a gaming thing, and then all of that. Do we have any doubt that people would demand some sort of change then? I mean, what would people not be willing to give up or change or radically alter to do it if they thought that this was a string of connected terror attacks? But if it's unconnected by anything other than our obsession with guns and our apparent worship of violence in this country, we don't do anything. We don't care because it seems disconnected. It's just a whole bunch of crazy white people. Well, they are connected, obviously, since it doesn't happen elsewhere.
It doesn't, not in this way,
No.
not with this much frequency. By the way, Republican candidates in the state of Florida have canceled their campaign events in Jacksonville following the shooting. So you might think, oh, that's the honorable thing to do. They're doing this out of respect for the victims. No, they're doing this because they don't want to answer any questions about gun legislation, which could hurt them politically in a state like Florida, which, by the way, happens to be the only state in the country, as far as I know, that has actually increased its support for Trump. Go Florida. So Republican candidates are canceling their campaign events in Jacksonville. Just to give you some specifics, Republican candidates for governor, Adam Putnam and Ron DeSantis, announced their events in Jacksonville had been canceled. And what are they offering to the victims of these shootings? You guessed it, thoughts and prayers. So Adam Putnam said, "Our prayers continue to be with the victims and their families. Please cooperate with local law enforcement and do not hesitate to be helpful in your community in any way you can." Yeah, if you're running for governor and the only thing you can offer are thoughts and prayers, then you're not a leader. You're just like everyone else. Also, Ron DeSantis said, due to today's tragic shooting in Jacksonville, the previously scheduled DeSantis campaign stop for tomorrow in Jacksonville will be canceled. Well, it has been canceled. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the entire Jacksonville community at this time. I mean, it's amazing.
I would like to ask for, I believe, the least change possible, just to pretend like you care. I'm not saying you have to do anything more than thoughts and prayers, but at least call it something else. Say our prayers and our deepest thoughts are with you. At least word it differently. It's almost like they're mocking us at this point, that they continue to use that cliched phrase that they know they're going to be attacked for, but they feel some sort of obligation. It's like they have some sort of contract with the NRA, that for the next 2 years, I have to say thoughts and prayers. I can't possibly say, you know, we're really thinking about you and we feel great compassion for your suffering. They literally can't word it in any other way.
Well, you know what? Who knows? Maybe thoughts and prayers would help. I'm going to show you what the scene was like when the shooting took place. We're not going to show you people getting shot. You're going to hear what it sounded like. And let's see if thoughts and prayers would help these victims out.
It's a lot. It's going to be hard to get them on stream. It's a lot.
It's not a tough out today. Excuse me, not an easy out.
Oh, what are you shooting with? Oh.
Yeah, it turns out that the previous thoughts and prayers that our politicians had doled out in the past, in past shootings, didn't seem to help these victims out in this case. It's so pathetic. They're supposed to be leaders. They're supposed to be individuals who make difficult decisions to represent us and protect us. That is literally the only role of government, to protect its citizens. That's it. And they fail to do it time and time again. Yeah. It's pathetic.
I had not actually listened to that before. That is rough. And I mean, the idea that if we have a problem and we're gonna try to fix it, like the only things that Republicans are willing to talk about are solutions that would begin 1 to 2 seconds into that videotape. We're not gonna do anything to stop him from having the gun. He's in the room, he wants to kill you. What could we do? Maybe the people playing Madden have guns. Maybe there's cops all over the place. Those are the only potential solutions. When every rational person watching that knows that the solution to that problem was that he didn't have a gun in the first place. And we just have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to do to ensure that people like that, either with mental health problems or a predisposition towards violence or God only knows what, don't have guns if they don't need to have guns?
Nothing.
And so far, we're willing to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, we're
absolutely
not going to do
nothing.
anything.
But Republicans have been willing to cede all of the ground between him going and buying the gun to him pointing at someone in a video game tournament. And then they're willing to talk about, hey, maybe we could have someone else shooting at him. Because a lot of people could listen to that tape and think there weren't enough guns firing then. That's the solution, a crossfire. That's the solution to all of our problems with mass violence in America.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna go to break, and maybe during that break, our supervising producer can brief us on the next mass shooting that we'll report on. But we'll be right back with more news.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. Before I read some TYT Lives, I just wanted to just remind you guys about a show on our network called We the People, which is hosted by the wonderful and lovely Nina Turner. If you're interested in checking it out, do it the way I do it. I love listening to podcasts and audio. You listen to it on the go. I'm in my car, I'm driving. You go to tyt.com/audio. No, I love podcasts though.
I do too, I listen to a lot of them.
I'm like obsessed with podcasts. I podcast everything.
What's your favorite podcast?
My
Other
favorite?
than We the People.
Oh, what's my favorite podcast? Well, obviously No Filter with Anna Kasparian.
You listen to your own podcast?
No, I don't. Actually, I do for quality control. But anyway, no, I don't know if I'm supposed to be promoting this because it's not on our network, but I really like The Daily. Yeah, with Michael Barbaro, who speaks very slowly and does a lot of that. But it's a good way of kind of understanding the inner workings of big news stories. So I really enjoy that. But I also listen to Nina Turner's podcast, We the People. I listen to your show, Damage Report.
Oh, thank you.
Which is fantastic.
And now available as a podcast.
It is, yes. So make sure you guys check it out. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, we had, it'll probably be up not too long after today's show was great. We had Brooke Thomas on and also a congressional candidate who's likely to become the first Muslim woman congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, was on the show today.
And you've interviewed a lot of fascinating people.
We've had great guests.
Yeah, definitely. All right, want to read some TYT Lives for you now. Gabby Marita says, can we take the whole safe space narrative back from conservatives? Like, is there something wrong with expecting the places I go to be safe? Yeah, it's funny because they want their own safe spaces, right? Which I've talked about on No Filter. I won't get into it now, just to save time. Tom Zawacki says, people in Florida are afraid of alligators, sharks, red tide, and sinkholes. All of them combined don't account for a fraction of the homicides created through the lax gun laws and the refusal to accept Medicaid funds. Oh, so true.
I mean, that especially, yeah.
To cover people properly. Such a great point.
Just super fast, but I mean, this happens all the time, but a woman was walking her dog in Florida last week and an alligator was threatening her dog, and so she like tried to scare off the alligator and the alligator dragged her in the water and she died.
I know. Please don't repeat that story. I saw it and it was horrible.
That is just terrible.
Okay, Foresto.
The dog lived.
Yeah.
I mean, that's who she was trying to protect. That's tough.
Thanks for bringing that up today.
This is Florida.
It's a great day.
This is what Florida's like.
Foresto Mintero on TYT Super Chat, thank you for helping the show, asked a question. I actually am not familiar with this controversy. Any response to the Donna Brazil tweet controversy? Do you know about this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Can we try to find it?
Yeah, we'll look into it during the break. I mean, if it's Donna Brazil, unaware of this.
I could probably guess she, I don't know, said maybe it was about the reforms this weekend. I'm not sure.
Right.
I don't think I follow her on Twitter.
We'll get briefed on that during the next break, and maybe I'll come up with an opinion by then. But I honestly haven't come across that story.
I'd prefer to predict. No, I don't know.
Or speculate. Okay, moving on to some other news. The family members of an Iowa college student by the name of Mollie Tibbetts, the woman who was tragically murdered, the family members are coming out and speaking out against how her death has been politicized by the right wing. Now, she was allegedly murdered by a man named Christian Rivera, and there is still some uncertainty as to whether or not he's in the country legally or illegally, but what we do know is that he is a Mexican individual in the country. There is some possibility that he's here illegally. And so the Trump administration, along with other right-wing pundits, have exploited this tragedy in order to make a statement about immigration into the United States. And Mollie Tibbetts' family is not happy about that. Before we get to their statements, I want to give you a sense of what Trump has said in the past to politicize this tragedy. Take a look.
The illegal alien coming in, very sadly, from Mexico, and you saw what happened to that incredible, beautiful young woman. Should have never happened. Illegally in our country. We've had a huge impact, but the laws are so bad.
So Trump has done this in the past where he has taken family members of victims who were killed by undocumented immigrants and has paraded them around in an effort to spread anecdotal evidence, propaganda about how we need to squash any and all immigration from Mexico or Central American countries into the United States. But Mollie Tibbetts' family is not having it. And I actually give them a lot of credit because their statements are strong and in this political climate, very courageous, because anyone who speaks out against Trump and his cronies gets attacked immediately. But they seem to be brave enough to come forward and say, no, you're not gonna exploit Mollie's death for your political narrative. So one of Mollie's family members, this is actually Mollie's cousin, Sandy Tibbetts Murphy, says, especially for those of you who did not know her in life, you do not get to usurp Mollie and her legacy for your racist, false narrative now that she is no longer with us. We hereby reclaim our Mollie. She continues to say, Mollie was killed and a man has been arrested and charged with her murder. Yes, that man is an immigrant to this country with uncertainty as to his legal status. But it matters not. He is a man whose path in life crossed that of Mollie's life with tragic results.
I mean, we've seen a lot of things get politicized in this country in a fairly unsubtle way. This is about as unsubtle as it gets. Like they're gleeful. They're gleeful over this situation. Trump held it in better than some, but some of the pundits on the right, like they can't get over themselves how happy they are about this. And we know, has anyone presented any evidence that the violence was because he was an undocumented immigrant? Does it have anything directly to do with what he did? Not that we've seen. We haven't seen anything about that. And really, if we were a rational country, the conversation that we would have right now, if you wanted to bring up the fact that he's undocumented, would go like this. So news is apparently an undocumented immigrant killed her. We don't actually know for sure, but let's say that it is. Oh, wow, that's scary. You think we should do something about it? Okay, well, do they commit crimes more than regular people? Because that would be, maybe then we should do something about it. Oh, both undocumented and documented immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than native-born citizens? Oh, well then it's probably not a gigantic problem. This is a tragic thing that happened here, but it's not some sort of systemic problem across the country. Yeah, and they don't care about that. And the fact that they don't care about those stats show that they don't actually care about the crime. They don't actually think this will be a solution to crime. They care about the image of it, the theme of it, what it stands in for socially, and especially coming so soon after bad news for Donald Trump. They're going to salivate over that.
What's devastating about it is that this type of propaganda is effective. It really is. Because, I mean, if you're right, if you look at the broader picture, if you put anecdotal evidence aside, which is worthless, by the way, and you look at actual trends, you will notice, first off, if you're concerned about saving lives, maybe look into how laxed gun laws lead to more mass shootings and more deaths. Okay, because that's a real trend in the country that these very people who are exploiting Mollie Tibbetts' death have absolutely no concern about whatsoever. Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. But when it comes to immigrants, you're right, whether they're undocumented or documented, study after study shows. You look at enclaves, you look at communities that are, where immigrants are prevalent, and crime rates actually go down. But that doesn't matter because we have some anecdotal, possibly some anecdotal evidence showing that an undocumented man killed a woman, right? Yeah. An American citizen. So let me give you more from Sandy Tibbetts Murphy. She also says Mollie was murdered because a man denied her right to say no. Our national discussion needs to be about the violence committed in our society, mostly by men. So when we previously covered this story, I shared some numbers regarding murders that were committed, homicides that were committed by white men. And I was doing that to make a point, right? Oh, look at all these white men committing homicides. Maybe we should deport them. Maybe we should really reconsider what citizenship means in the country. Maybe being born here isn't good enough. Obviously, I was saying that to make a statement. I wasn't being serious because I don't genuinely think we should deport white men from the country. But you can politicize anything. You could exploit any number for your advantage, right? And in the country, if you really want to have a conversation about, violence against women, maybe we do need to address, the perpetrators of these crimes. Republicans continuously vote no on the Violence Against Women Act, which is legislation that aims to provide women with the resources to defend themselves and take these domestic abusers to court. Why do Republicans keep voting against that? I'm curious.
Sends a strong message to Republican men that they probably like. And yeah, so her talking about basically toxic masculinity and men not being willing to accept a no and all that. You could look at that and say, well, that's politicizing it hypothetically if I were to like launch some sort of campaign. But at the very least, it seems to have something to do with the actual killing and not just picking out one demographic characteristic of who the person was. And I would also like to say, one of the reasons I'm so angry about what they're doing with Mollie Tibbetts and her murder is that it's not just restrained to them being the ones who are politicizing it. We then have to step in and respond to it because of this racist campaign that they're involved in. But I don't want to. I don't want to talk about any of this in relation to her death. I didn't know Mollie. I didn't know what she believed. God knows how she would feel about someone like me talking in this way. But I feel like I have to step in because of how blatantly racistly her murder is being used.
Yeah, it's pretty
But there's nothing about this situation that's good. And we're being forced into this position by really callous, politically motivated, self-interested people.
Yeah. Mollie's father also spoke out and went the extra mile and thanked the Hispanic community. So I want to give you his specific statements. Again, this is Mollie's father, Rob Tibbetts. He says the Hispanic community are Iowans. They have the same values as Iowans. As far as I'm concerned, they're Iowans with better food. This is what he said during her eulogy, by the way. He continued to say, we're at the end of a long ordeal, but we need to turn toward life, Mollie's life, because Mollie's nobody's victim. Mollie's my hero.
I can't imagine, I mean, obviously can't imagine it happening at all, but then having to respond to this as the family, having this entire machine take her up and try to use her for their cause. It's just horrible to put that on top of the pain that they're already feeling.
All right.
And to go really fast, to go back to something that you said, I mean, Donald Trump is speaking favorably about her now, but when he sees some of the negative stuff that the family has said, if more comes out, like, do you honestly think that he won't turn and start attacking her family? There's no one who is immune to that.
I certainly would not put it past him.
And then it will take like that fast, his supporters will turn on the family too.
I know. I mean, so my question is, are we proud of what we are as a country right now?
You could be applying that to literally any issue and I would say no.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. It really is. I mean, we live in a country where people think it makes more sense to defend a guy who consistently defames the parents of Sandy Hook victims rather than defending those Sandy Hook victims. That's the country we live in. Yeah. Anyway.
We've all gone mad.
I'm gonna stop myself before I get myself into some trouble with other commentary. So let's talk about John McCain, because that was a big story. Over the weekend, John McCain passed away at the age of 81. He was diagnosed with brain cancer, and before the weekend begun, his family had notified the press that they were going to discontinue his treatment. Soon after that, news broke that he had passed away. Now, there have been some interesting developments coming from the White House in response to McCain's death, and they are not good. So let's start off with Trump refusing to really address the fact that John McCain had died. Now, first, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Chief of Staff John Kelly, and other White House aides advocated for an official statement that gave the Vietnam War POW plaudits for his military and Senate service and called him a hero. But Trump was not in favor of that. In fact, according to reports, Trump told aides that he wanted to post a brief tweet instead, and the statement praising him, John McCain, was not released. Okay, so what did Trump say through Twitter? You know, that's where he's this articulate communicator. My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and prayers are with you. So this is speculation, but I would argue that it's accurate speculation. Trump didn't even write that. There were no misspellings. There was no grammatical error. There was punctuation. Someone else wrote that on his behalf. And even so, it didn't even really acknowledge John McCain, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I didn't have as much of a problem with the tweet as most people did.
Yeah,
he
I don't
certainly
really care.
could have said more.
I don't
but,
expect anything from Trump. Look, this whole story puts us in a weird position because on one hand, of course, we had issues with John McCain. He was a war hawk, all of that. You know, it's not like we agreed with everything he did. Now, progressives get ready to be angry with me. He wasn't all bad either, right? Now, Trump has no redeeming qualities. I don't care about Trump. There's nothing that I can turn to and say, nah, that was good. That was a good thing about Trump. With John McCain, it was different. You know, he was a mixed bag. Yes, he was a war hawk. Yes, he said some pretty terrible things about the Asian community in the past. I got no love for him when it comes to those things. Yeah. But when it comes to, you know, some of the things he was outspoken about, whether it be about immigrants, whether it be about speaking up against Donald Trump, those are the things that are admirable. He was the
McCain-Feingold and
McCain-Feingold. He was the only Republican senator, if I'm remembering correctly. No, he was the one who made the deciding vote in the Affordable Care Act repeal.
To save part of it.
To save part of it. So he wasn't all bad, okay?
Yeah,
so
he was
everybody
mostly bad. He was the vast majority bad.
Yes.
He was almost entirely bad.
But with that said, you are a US president. Just have a little bit of class. I know that we can't really expect that from him. And he hated McCain. It was clear he hated McCain. He said that he preferred soldiers who didn't get captured, a reference to McCain being a prisoner of war for 6 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so during a press conference, here's how Trump handled questions about McCain's death.
Thank you.
Nothing at all about John McCain.
We're finished. Guys. We're finished.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
So one other thing that I wanted to say to juxtapose his response to McCain's passing. Remember last week, Trump was tweeting nonstop about how admirable Manafort is.
That's true.
This is a man, okay, who was working for the Russian government and was hiding money from the US government so he would evade taxes, okay? And I do want to clarify that error. I think that there was someone on this network who said that Manafort's convictions had nothing to do with Russia. It absolutely did have something to do with Russia because he made his money through Russia, through representing Russian interests in Ukraine in order to help Vladimir Putin achieve what he wanted in Ukraine. And then he made $60 million doing it and hid $30 million from the US government so he could evade taxes. So the root of that problem was Russia and the fact that Manafort was a foreign agent who failed to register as a foreign agent here in the United States. Just want to make sure that we correct any errors that might have aired on our network. With that said though, what are your thoughts on all of this, John?
I think, the obvious thing to say is it's pathetic, but it probably would go maybe in the top 50 most pathetic things that Donald Trump has done. I mean, the simplest thing in the world would be, Mr. President, do you have any comments about John McCain? Yeah, I'd just like to thank him for his service. Obviously, great work in the military, fighting on behalf of his country, and a long and distinguished career in the Senate that will be remembered for a very long time. Thank you. That's the easiest thing in the world. You could say that about somebody that just punched you in the face and it wouldn't be that hard. John McCain's dead. You've won, sort of, I guess. You hated the man, now he's dead and you're somehow still alive. It would be the easiest thing in the world to just act, take your pick, and I apologize if I offend anyone. Either act like an adult or act like a man. Do one of those two things. Maybe an adult man, if you've got it inside of you to do that. The simplest thing in the world to just tweet, for all of our disagreements, John McCain did what he believed in and he'll be remembered as one of the giants of the Senate in the 20th century. That's simple. That's not saying he was right on the issues. That's not saying he wasn't a D-bag to you or anything like that. That is the most simple thing in the world. But he doesn't have any of that in him. He is a vindictive, narcissistic, tiny little man-child.
That's right. That's what we're dealing with.
And this is not from my point of view. I don't care about John McCain, really. I feel bad for his family, and that's what I expressed on Twitter. I lost my father to cancer. I can only imagine what it's like for the family to do the same thing right now. But he's of your party. You agree with 96% of the votes that he's taken in his career, and you can't work up 7 or 8 words to rub together in his honor?
No, he can't. He can't even handle allowing the release of a White House statement that he doesn't have to write himself. He won't allow it.
You know what? Maybe it was that the word hero was in there.
Yeah,
and
of course
that's why he has to attack John McCain on that particular thing, which, he's done terrible things afterward, pushed for policies that killed hundreds of thousands of people, did about as bad stuff as he can. But what he did in Vietnam was heroic. I haven't done anything like that in my life. Have you done anything like that in your life?
Of course I haven't.
Edwin?
And by the way,
most of the people watching this haven't.
It wasn't just that he was a prisoner of war for years. It was that he was being tortured to give up top secret information to our enemies at the time, and he refused to do it. Yeah. In the meantime, Trump didn't go to Vietnam because he lied about bone spurs in his foot.
And he had his personal Vietnam, which was the fight to not get an STD, which is his quote, not mine. So that's why he lashes out, because he sees in John McCain something that he has never had. 1 single ounce of heroism or integrity or honor or any of that.
Let's take a break. When we come back, I'll read your TYT lives, and also some drama involving National Enquirer releasing Trump's doorman from his contract. There might be some juicy tidbits here, okay? Come right back.